Marcus had always been the kind of person who believed in pushing through pain. As the head trainer at Elite Fitness Academy, he had built his reputation on turning soft recruits into hardened athletes. His motto was simple: no excuses, no exceptions, no mercy. The autumn morning brought a new batch of trainees, and Marcus stood at the front of the training facility with his arms crossed, studying each face. Most looked eager, some nervous, but one woman in the back corner caught his attention for all the wrong reasons. She wore a thick, long-sleeved jacket despite the warm weather, and when he called for everyone to begin their warm-up stretches, she barely moved her arms. Sarah Chen had joined the academy 3 weeks ago, and Marcus had noticed her peculiar behavior from day one. While other trainees shed their outer layers and dove into the intense workouts, Sarah always kept her jacket on. She participated in the exercises, but with obvious limitations, often stopping to catch her breath or adjusting her sleeves. During the morning's cardio session, Marcus watched as Sarah lagged behind the group. Her breathing was labored, and she kept pulling at her jacket collar. The other trainees were drenched in sweat, their workout clothes sticking to their bodies, but Sarah remained bundled up like it was winter. "Chen!" Marcus barked across the gym. "Pick up the pace, this isn't a leisurely stroll in the park." Sarah nodded and tried to increase her speed on the treadmill, but within minutes she was gripping the handrails and looking pale. Marcus strode over, his irritation growing with each step. "What's the excuse today?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Too hot? Too tired? Machine not working right?" Sarah looked up at him with eyes that held something he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't defiance or anger, but something deeper, something that looked almost like fear. "I'm trying my best, sir," she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the treadmills. Marcus had heard every excuse in the book during his 15 years as a trainer. Bad backs, old injuries, family problems, work stress. He had seen people use everything as a reason to avoid pushing themselves. In his experience, most limitations were mental, not physical. "Your best isn't good enough," he replied, crossing his arms. "I've been watching you for weeks, Chen. You show up in that ridiculous jacket every day, barely break a sweat, and then wonder why you're not seeing results. This is a fitness academy, not a fashion show." The other trainees had stopped their exercises and were now watching the confrontation. Marcus was known for his tough love approach, but something about this interaction felt different. Sarah's face had gone completely white, and her hands were trembling as she gripped the treadmill handles. "I have my reasons for the jacket," Sarah said, her voice getting even quieter. "Reasons?" Marcus let out a harsh laugh. "Let me guess. You're self-conscious about your arms? Worried about what people might think? Well, here's some free advice. Nobody cares what you look like. They care about results, and right now you're not delivering any." Sarah stepped off the treadmill and faced him directly. For a moment, Marcus thought she might finally snap back at him, show some of the fire he tried to ignite in all his trainees. Instead, she just stood there looking smaller than her already petite frame. "I understand your frustration with me," she said carefully. "I know I'm not performing like the others, but please trust me when I say that I'm doing everything I can, given my circumstances." Marcus shook his head in disgust. "Circumstances? The only circumstance that matters here is your attitude. You walk in here every day dressed like you're going to a winter picnic instead of a training session. You hold back on every exercise, and then you want sympathy for your mysterious circumstances." The gym had fallen completely silent now. Even the music seemed to have faded into the background as everyone waited to see how this confrontation would end. Sarah looked around at all the faces staring at her, then back at Marcus. "I pay the same membership fees as everyone else," she said with the first hint of strength he had heard in her voice. "I show up every day, I follow the programs, and I don't complain. I may not be your ideal trainee, but I'm here and I'm trying." Marcus felt his frustration boiling over. He had dealt with difficult trainees before, but Sarah's quiet persistence in her limitations was driving him crazy. In his mind, she was wasting everyone's time with her mysterious jacket and her gentle excuses. "You know what your problem is, Chen?" he said, stepping closer. "You're living in a comfort zone. That jacket is like a security blanket, and until You're willing to shed it and push yourself beyond what's comfortable. You'll never achieve anything worthwhile in here. Sarah's jaw tightened, and for the first time since joining the academy, she looked angry. Really angry. Marcus felt a small surge of satisfaction. Finally, he was getting through to her. You think you know everything about everyone who walks through these doors, Sarah said, her voice still quiet but now carrying an edge that made Marcus pause. You think you can judge people's effort and commitment based on what you see on the surface? That's exactly what I think, Marcus replied without hesitation. And in this case, what I see is someone who's not willing to do what it takes to succeed. The standoff continued for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds. Other trainees shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or continue watching. Sarah's breathing had become rapid and shallow, and Marcus noticed that her hands were now clenched into fists at her sides. Finally, Sarah took a deep breath and looked around the gym one more time. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, but carried a weight that Marcus hadn't heard before. You want to see commitment, Marcus? You want to see what it really takes to push through pain and show up every day despite impossible circumstances? She paused and reached for the zipper of her jacket. Fine, but remember that you asked for this. The zipper seemed to move in slow motion as Sarah pulled it down with deliberate, steady movements. Marcus stood frozen, suddenly aware that something significant was about to happen. The cocky smirk he had worn moments earlier began to fade as he watched Sarah's face. There was no anger there anymore, just a kind of resigned determination. The jacket fell away from her shoulders, and for a split second, Marcus thought he had been wrong about everything. Sarah was clearly in excellent physical shape beneath the bulky clothing. Her arms were lean and muscular, evidence of someone who actually worked out regularly. But then his eyes focused, and his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. Dark purple bruises covered her upper arms like grotesque sleeves. Some were fresh and deep, while others had faded to yellow and green, creating a sickening rainbow of violence across her skin. But it wasn't just bruises. Thin, precise scars crisscrossed her forearms in patterns that spoke of repeated, deliberate harm. Near her shoulder, 4 distinct finger-shaped marks pressed into her skin like a brand. The gym had become completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to have stopped humming. Marcus felt his mouth go dry as his eyes took in more details he wished he couldn't see. Sarah's collarbone bore a long, thin scar that disappeared beneath her tank top. Her wrists showed faint rope burns that had been carefully hidden by her jacket sleeves. Jesus Christ, whispered Jenny, one of the other trainees, breaking the horrible silence. Sarah stood perfectly still, her arms at her sides, no longer trying to hide anything. Her breathing was controlled now, as if removing the jacket had somehow freed her from more than just the physical weight of the clothing. This is why I wear the jacket, she said quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the dead silent gym. This is why I can't always push as hard as everyone else. This is why some days I can barely lift my arms above my head. Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. All his assumptions, all his tough guy motivational speeches, all his frustration with her limitations suddenly felt like the worst kind of cruelty. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Sarah continued, her voice steady but distant as if she was talking about someone else's body. I've been married for 8 years. My husband doesn't like it when I exercise. Says it makes me think I'm better than him. But I keep coming here because for 1 hour a day I can pretend I'm strong. I can pretend I'm working towards something better. The marks on her arms told a story that Marcus was beginning to understand with horrible clarity. The finger-shaped bruises were too precise to be accidental. The scars were too systematic to be from any normal injury. Even in his shock, his trainer's eye could see how the injuries would affect her movement, her breathing, her ability to perform certain exercises. The fresh bruises are from 2 nights ago, Sarah continued, as if she was giving a medical report. He was angry about the grocery bill. The older ones are from last week when I came home 20 minutes late from here, and these scars. She traced a line along her forearm. These are from the first time I tried to leave him 3 years ago. Marcus felt sick, Every harsh word he had spoken to her over the past weeks came flooding back with devastating clarity. Every time he had pushed her to work harder, every sarcastic comment about her jacket, every assumption about her commitment, it all felt like he had been kicking someone who was already down. "Sarah, he started, but she held up her hand to stop him. "I don't need your pity," she said firmly. "I need you to understand that showing up here every day, despite everything you see on my body, is the hardest thing I do. Every time I walk through those doors, I'm defying him. Every time I try to get stronger, I'm risking making things worse at home." The other trainees were shifting uncomfortably, some looking away, others staring in horrified fascination. Marcus noticed that several of the women had tears in their eyes. Jake, one of his most dedicated male trainees, had his hands clenched into fists and was staring at the floor. "I've been coming here for 3 weeks," Sarah continued, "and every single day you've made me feel like I wasn't trying hard enough, like I was weak, like I was making excuses." She paused and looked directly at Marcus. "Do you want to know what real weakness looks like? Real weakness is going home to someone who does this to you and pretending everything is fine." Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Sarah, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." "Of course you had no idea," she replied, but without anger. "That's the point. You never asked why I wore the jacket. You never wondered if there might be a reason beyond vanity or insecurity. You just assumed you knew everything about me based on what you could see." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. Marcus prided himself on reading people, on understanding what motivated them, on knowing how to push each individual trainee to their maximum potential. But he had been completely blind to what Sarah was going through. "I come here because I'm trying to get strong enough to leave him," Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly for the first time. "Every day I can feel myself getting a little bit stronger, a little bit more confident, and every day you've been telling me that my efforts aren't good enough." Marcus looked around the gym at the shocked faces of his other trainees. Some were crying openly now. Others looked angry, though. He wasn't sure if their anger was directed at Sarah's husband, at him, or at the situation in general. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus asked, though even as the words left his mouth, he realized how stupid the question was. Sarah gave him a look that was almost pitying. "Tell you what exactly? That my husband beats me? That I'm covered in bruises and scars? That sometimes I can barely move without pain?" She shook her head. "Would that have made you treat me differently? Would that have made you gentler with your criticism?" The honest answer was probably yes. And that realization made Marcus feel even worse. He should have been paying attention to his trainees as individuals, not making assumptions about their limitations or motivations. "Besides," Sarah added, "telling people never ends well for me. The last time I tried to get help, someone called my husband to check on me. I spent 2 weeks unable to lift my arms at all after that conversation." The revelation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Marcus stared at Sarah, his mind racing to process not just what he was seeing, but what she had just told him about people trying to help making things worse for her. The responsibility of that knowledge felt crushing. Sarah began to put her jacket back on, but Jenny, the trainee who had whispered earlier, stepped forward. "Wait," she said softly. "Don't hide them again. Not here. Not anymore." "Jenny's right," said Mike, another regular trainee who had been coming to the gym for over a year. "This is supposed to be a safe space. You shouldn't have to hide who you are here." Sarah looked around the group, her eyes filled with uncertainty. Marcus could see her calculating, weighing risks, trying to determine if these people could be trusted. The vulnerability in her expression made his chest tight with regret. For every harsh word he had ever spoken to her, "It's easier to hide them," Sarah said quietly. "People get uncomfortable when they see this kind of thing. They either want to save you, which puts you in more danger, or they want to pretend they never saw it, which makes you feel invisible." Marcus knew she was talking about him with that second comment. He had been so focused on what he perceived as her lack of effort that he had essentially made her invisible as a person. She was just another trainee who wasn't meeting his standards, not a human being with a complex and dangerous situation. "What if we made this place different?" asked Lisa, a middle-aged woman who had been quietly watching the entire exchange. What if this was the one place where you didn't have to hide? Sarah's hand paused on her zipper. I don't know if that's possible. These marks, they're not just bruises and scars. They're evidence of my shame. Every single one represents a time I wasn't strong enough to stop him, wasn't smart enough to avoid making him angry, wasn't brave enough to leave. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. For the first time, he was beginning to understand that strength came in forms he had never considered. The fact that Sarah showed up at the gym every day despite her circumstances wasn't weakness. It was the most incredible display of courage he had ever witnessed. Sarah, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion, I need you to know something. Every day that you walk through those doors, every exercise you complete, every moment you push yourself even a little bit, that's not weakness. That's the strongest thing anyone in this gym has ever done. She looked at him skeptically. Really? Because for the past 3 weeks, you've been telling me the opposite. The guilt hit him fresh, but Marcus forced himself to continue. I was wrong, completely wrong. I thought strength was about pushing through pain and ignoring limitations, but you've been doing that every single day in ways I never imagined. Sarah let her jacket fall to the floor, standing there in just her tank top. The full extent of her injuries was visible to everyone. Marcus counted at least 15 distinct bruises in various stages of healing. The scars were even more numerous, creating a map of trauma across her skin. He'll notice if I come home with new muscle definition, she said quietly. He already suspicious about the time I spend here. If I start looking too strong, too confident. She trailed off, but everyone understood the implication. So we help you get strong in ways he won't notice, said Jake, speaking for the first time since Sarah had removed her jacket. Core strength, flexibility, mental toughness, things that don't show on the outside but make you more prepared for whatever you need to be prepared for. Marcus nodded, his trainer's mind already working on the problem. We can focus on functional strength, balance, endurance, things that will help you in practical situations, but won't be obvious to someone who's not looking for them. Why would you want to help me? Sarah asked, her voice small and confused. I'm just the trainee who can't keep up, who makes excuses, who wears a jacket in summer. No, Marcus said firmly. You're the trainee who has been fighting a war every single day and still shows up to get stronger. You're the person who has been dealing with more pain than any of us can imagine and still tries to push herself. You're not making excuses, Sarah. You're making miracles. For the first time since Marcus had known her, Sarah smiled. It was small and tentative, but it was real. I've been so afraid that if anyone knew the truth, they would either try to fix everything for me or they would decide I was too much trouble. The only person who can decide when and how to change your situation is you, said Lisa. But that doesn't mean you have to get strong enough to do it all by yourself. Sarah nodded slowly, and Marcus could see something changing in her posture. She was standing straighter, her shoulders back, no longer trying to make herself invisible. I've been planning, she admitted. Saving money when I can, researching shelters, trying to figure out how to leave safely. But every time I think I'm almost ready, something happens that reminds me how much stronger he is than me. Physical strength isn't the only kind of strength that matters, Marcus said, and he was surprised by how much he meant it. 3 weeks ago, he would have dismissed that statement as feel-good nonsense. Now he understood that he had been operating with a kindergarten-level understanding of what strength really meant. The fact that you're planning, that you're here getting stronger, that you haven't given up, that takes more courage than anything any of us have ever done, added Jenny. Sarah looked around the group, and Marcus could see her making a decision. If I do this, if I stop hiding here, I need to know that it stays here. If word gets back to him that people know, it stays here, Marcus said immediately. Whatever you need from us, whatever support we can give you that won't put you in more danger, we'll do it. But it's your decision, your timeline, your plan. Sarah picked up her jacket from the floor but didn't put it on. Instead, she folded it carefully and set it on a nearby bench. Okay, she said, and her voice was stronger than Marcus had ever heard it. Let's see what I can really do. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus watched Sarah transform in ways that had nothing to do with muscle mass or endurance improvements. Without the heavy jacket, she moved differently, not necessarily stronger or faster, but with more awareness of her own body. She still favored her left arm on days when the bruises were fresh, still had to modify certain exercises when her ribs were tender, but she was no longer hiding. The other gym members had rallied around her in subtle but meaningful ways. Jenny started arriving at the same time as Sarah, creating a natural workout buddy system without anyone having to discuss it. Mike positioned himself near the free weights whenever Sarah was working in that area, not hovering or being obvious, but just present in case she needed anything. Lisa had quietly started bringing extra water bottles and protein bars, leaving them on the bench near Sarah's folded jacket like offerings at a shrine. Marcus had completely redesigned Sarah's training program, though he was careful to frame it as optimization rather than accommodation. Instead of the high-intensity, high-impact routines he typically favored, he focused on building her core strength, improving her balance, and developing her reflexes. These weren't just random exercises. They were specifically chosen to help someone who might need to run, hide, or defend themselves. Today we're working on situational awareness drills, Marcus announced during Sarah's 4th week at the gym. It's about being conscious of your environment, knowing where the exits are, being able to move quickly from any position. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Is this normal gym training? It's self-defense training disguised as fitness, Marcus admitted. I figured you might appreciate the dual purpose. For the first time since he'd known her, Sarah laughed. It was a real laugh, not the careful, quiet sounds she usually made. You're learning to think like someone who lives with danger. The comment hit Marcus harder than he expected. He had been so focused on helping Sarah get physically stronger that he hadn't fully grasped how much mental and emotional strength she had already developed just to survive her daily life. Teach me, he said suddenly. Sarah looked confused. Teach you what? Teach me how to think like someone who lives with danger. I've been training people for 15 years, but I've only been training them for normal life. I want to understand what you need. Sarah studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether he was serious. You really want to know? Yes. Sarah walked over to the gym entrance and gestured for Marcus to follow. Okay. When I walk into any room, what do you think I notice first? Marcus looked around the gym, trying to see it through her eyes. The equipment? Wrong. Sarah pointed toward the back corner. I noticed that there are 2 exits, the main entrance and the emergency exit near the bathrooms. I noticed that the emergency exit doesn't have a clear path because someone left those weights in front of it. I noticed that the mirrors give me a view of most of the room, but there are blind spots near the locker room doors. Marcus felt a chill as he realized what she was describing. You're always looking for escape routes. Always, Sarah confirmed. I notice which men are bigger than me, which ones seem angry or aggressive, who's watching me and how. I notice loud noises that might cover the sound of someone approaching. I notice objects that could be used as weapons if I needed to defend myself. Jesus, Sarah, that's exhausting. It's automatic now. I don't even think about it anymore. She walked back toward the center of the gym. When you were yelling at me those first few weeks, part of my brain was calculating how quickly I could get to an exit if you decided to get physical. The revelation made Marcus feel sick all over again. Not only had his harsh training methods been counterproductive, they had been actively triggering trauma responses in someone who was already living in constant fear. Is that why you always positioned yourself near the back of the group? He asked. Never turn your back on a room full of people if you can avoid it, Sarah said matter-of-factly, and always stay close to an exit. Marcus looked around his gym with new eyes. The layout that had seemed efficient and motivating now looked like a potential trap. The loud music and shouting that he used to pump people up could easily mask threatening sounds. The mirrors that were meant to help people check their form could also help someone monitor who was watching them. We need to make some changes around here, he said quietly. You don't have to change everything for me, Sarah protested. It's not just for you, Marcus replied. I'm starting to realize that you're probably not the only person who walks in here carrying invisible burdens. If small changes can make this place feel safer for people who need it, then we should make those changes. Sarah smiled, and Marcus noticed that her smiles were becoming more frequent and more genuine. You're becoming a better trainer. I'm becoming a better person, I hope. They worked together for the next hour, with Sarah teaching Marcus about threat assessment and spatial awareness while he helped her practice movements that could be useful in dangerous situations. It felt like a collaboration rather than a traditional trainer-client relationship. During a water break, Sarah grew more serious. Marcus, I need to tell you something. Things are getting worse at home. Marcus felt his stomach clench. Worse? How? He's becoming more suspicious about the time I spend here. Last night he went through my gym bag looking for evidence that I'm doing something I shouldn't be. He found the protein bars Lisa gave me and wanted to know who I was getting food from. What did you tell him? That I bought them myself, which made him angry because he controls all our money. Sarah touched a new bruise on her upper arm that Marcus hadn't noticed before. He's also started timing my trips. If I'm gone longer than an hour and 15 minutes, he gets violent. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger that he had to work to control. What do you need from us? I need to accelerate my plans. I was hoping to have more time to save money and get stronger, but I don't think I have more time. Sarah's voice was steady, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. I think he's planning something. He's been too calm lately, too controlling. It feels like he's building up to something big. What can we do to help? Sarah looked around the gym, then back at Marcus. I need to know that when I make my move, I'll be strong enough to follow through. Not just physically strong, but mentally strong. I need to believe that I deserve better than what he's giving me. Sarah, you deserve so much better than what he's giving you. I know that intellectually, she replied. But knowing it and feeling it are different things. I've been told I'm worthless for so long that some days I believe it. Marcus felt a wave of admiration for this woman who had been fighting a war on multiple fronts while he had been focused on bicep curls and cardio routines. What would make you feel stronger? Sarah thought for a moment. I want to be able to do one perfect pull-up. That's it? That's it. I've never been able to do a pull-up in my entire life. If I can do one perfect pull-up, I'll know I'm strong. Enough for whatever comes next. Marcus nodded, understanding that this wasn't really about the pull-up itself. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of achieving something that had always seemed impossible. Then that's what we're going to work toward, he said. How much time do we have? Sarah's expression grew grim. I don't know. Maybe a few more weeks. Maybe less. The training intensified over the following week, but not in the way Marcus had traditionally pushed his clients. Instead of adding weight or increasing repetitions, he focused on helping Sarah develop the specific muscle groups and movement patterns she would need for a pull-up. More importantly, he worked on building her confidence with each small improvement. Feel that? Marcus asked, as Sarah completed a set of assisted pull-ups with less support than she had needed the week before. Your lats are firing perfectly, and your grip strength has improved dramatically. Sarah hung from the bar for a moment before dropping down, breathing hard but smiling. I can feel the difference. Last week I couldn't even hang here for 10 seconds without assistance. You're getting stronger every day, Jenny added from the nearby elliptical machine. The informal support network that had developed around Sarah had become more obvious as her jacket remained permanently folded on the bench. But as Sarah's physical strength grew, the tension in her life outside the gym escalated. She started arriving with fresh injuries more frequently, a split lip one day, carefully concealed bruises around her throat another day, and once, a barely disguised black eye that she tried to hide behind makeup and careful positioning. He's getting worse, she admitted to Marcus during a quiet moment between exercises. Yesterday he accused me of having an affair because I smiled at the grocery store cashier. The day before that, he went through my phone looking for evidence that I'm talking to other men. Marcus felt helpless in the face of her situation. Every instinct he had screamed at him to intervene, to confront her husband, to call the police, to do something. But Sarah had been clear about the dangers of well-meaning interference, and he forced himself to follow her lead. What's your timeline looking like now? He asked carefully. Soon, Sarah replied, and there was something different in her voice, a hardness that hadn't been there before. I've been in contact with a shelter that has an opening next week. I have enough money saved for the first month somewhere else. And yesterday I found the papers. What papers? Insurance papers. Life insurance papers with my name on them that he took out 6 months ago. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, but Marcus saw her hands tremble slightly. I think he's planning to kill me. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had known Sarah's situation was dangerous, but hearing her say those words made everything terrifyingly real. Sarah, we need to get you out of there right now. I can't just run without a plan. If he finds me and brings me back. She trailed off, but they both understood the implication. What do you need? I need to do that pull-up first, Sarah said with quiet determination. I know it sounds stupid, but I need to prove to myself that I can do something I never thought was possible. If I can do that, I'll know I'm strong enough to start over. Marcus wanted to argue that a pull-up was irrelevant compared to her immediate safety, but he was beginning to understand that for Sarah, the pull-up represented something much larger than a simple exercise. It was proof that she could overcome limitations, that she could achieve goals that once seemed impossible, that she was capable of more than anyone, including herself, had believed. Okay, he said. Let's do this. For the next 3 days, Marcus adjusted everything in his schedule to focus on Sarah's training. He arrived early to give her extra time, stayed late to work with her on technique, and enlisted the help of the other gym members to create a supportive environment. On Friday morning, Sarah arrived at the gym with a large bruise on her shoulder and news that made everyone's blood run cold. He knows about the gym, she said quietly as she set down her gym bag. He followed me yesterday and watched from the parking lot. When I got home, he had questions about who I was talking to, what exercises I was doing, why I seemed happier lately. What did you tell him? Lisa asked, her voice tight with concern. I told him I was just trying to get in shape for him, trying to make myself more attractive. But he didn't believe me. Sarah pulled off her jacket, revealing not just bruises, but what looked like burns on her forearm. He's escalating. Last night he told me he didn't like who I was becoming and that he was going to fix me. The group fell silent, everyone understanding the implication of those words. I'm leaving tonight, Sarah announced. After he falls asleep, I'm taking what I can carry and going to the shelter. I probably won't be able to come back here for a while, maybe never. Marcus felt his chest tighten. The thought of Sarah leaving without achieving her goal felt wrong. But more importantly, the thought of never seeing her again, never knowing if she was safe, was unbearable. Before you go, he said, let's see if you can do that pull-up. Sarah looked at the pull-up bar, then around at the group of people who had become her unlikely support system. Right now? Right now. Sarah walked over to the bar and stood beneath it for a long moment, staring up at the metal that had become the symbol of everything she wanted to prove about herself. Marcus could see her gathering her courage, focusing her energy, preparing for what might be her last attempt. She jumped up and grabbed the bar, her grip strong and confident. For a moment she just hung there, feeling the weight of her body, the strength in her hands, the power in her back and shoulders that had developed over these intense weeks of training. You've got this, Jenny whispered from beside the bar. We believe in you, added Mike. Sarah took a deep breath, engaged her core, and began to pull. Marcus watched as every muscle in her back and arms fired in perfect coordination. Her chin rose slowly but steadily toward the bar, her face focused and determined, her breathing controlled. For one horrible moment she seemed to stall about halfway up, and Marcus thought she might not make it. But then Sarah's eyes found his, and he saw something fierce and unbreakable there. With one final surge of effort, she pulled her chin above the bar and held it there for a full second before lowering herself down with perfect control. The gym erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah dropped from the bar and stood there for a moment, staring at her hands as if she couldn't believe what they had just accomplished. I did it, she said, her voice filled with wonder. I actually did it. You did it, Marcus confirmed, and he was surprised to realize he had tears in his eyes. You're stronger than you ever imagined. Sarah looked around at the group of people who had supported her, encouraged her, and believed in her. 6 months later, Marcus was reviewing the morning schedule when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Excuse me, is this where I can sign up for personal training?" He turned around and for a moment didn't recognize the woman standing before him. Her hair was shorter and lighter, her posture completely different, and she was wearing a sleeveless workout top that showed off remarkably toned arms. But when she smiled, he knew immediately who it was. "Sarah?" Marcus could barely contain his shock and relief. "My God, you look different," she finished, laughing at his expression. "I should hope so. It's been quite a journey." Marcus wanted to hug her but wasn't sure if physical contact was welcome. Instead, he gestured toward his office. "Can we talk? I've been wondering about you every single day since you left." Sarah followed him to the small office overlooking the main gym floor. Through the window, Marcus could see Jenny on the elliptical machine. When Jenny spotted Sarah, her face lit up with joy and surprise. "Word's going to spread fast that you're here," Marcus said as he watched Jenny immediately start texting the others. "Everyone's going to want to see you." "I was hoping they would," Sarah replied. "I have a lot of people to thank." Marcus studied, her face looking for signs of the fear and tension that had been constant companions during her time at the gym. What he saw instead was confidence, peace, and something that looked like genuine happiness. "How are you?" he asked simply. "I'm free," Sarah said, and the way she said it made Marcus understand that freedom meant more than just physical safety. It wasn't easy. The first few weeks at the shelter were terrifying. I kept waiting for him to find me, kept jumping at every sound. But gradually I started to believe that I was really safe. And now I have my own apartment, a job I love, and I've been going to therapy twice a week. I've learned that the strength I built here wasn't just physical. Every time I completed a workout despite the pain, every time I showed up despite being afraid, every time I pushed myself a little further than I thought possible, all of that taught me that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that was different from professional pride. This was deeper, more meaningful than any transformation he had ever witnessed in his years as a trainer. "What happened with your husband?" he asked carefully. Sarah's expression grew more serious, but not fearful. "He tried to find me, of course. He called the police, claimed I'd been kidnapped, tried to convince my family that I was having a mental breakdown. But I had documented everything. Photos of the injuries, copies of the insurance papers, records of my hospital visits. When the detectives saw all the evidence, they realized who the real victim was." "Is he in jail?" "He pled guilty to domestic violence charges and got 2 years plus a permanent restraining order. More importantly, the divorce was finalized last month." Sarah held up her left hand, showing a ring finger that was pale where a wedding band used to be. "I'm legally free." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "Sarah, you've been through hell and back. You should be proud of yourself." "I am proud," she said, and Marcus could hear the truth of it in her voice. "But I'm also grateful. What happened in this gym changed everything for me. Not just the physical training, but the way you all saw me as a person worth fighting for." There was a knock on the office door and Jenny peeked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but Mike and Lisa are here and we were wondering if Sarah might want to work out with us." "Like old times?" Sarah grinned. "I'd love that, but I should warn you, I'm a lot stronger now." An hour later, Marcus watched from across the gym as Sarah moved through her workout with fluid confidence. She was spotting Mike on his bench press, encouraging Lisa through a difficult set of squats and laughing with Jenny between exercises. But what struck him most was how naturally she had taken on a mentoring role with 2 newer female gym members who had been watching her workout with obvious admiration. "She's incredible," said Jake, appearing beside Marcus. "Look how she's helping those women. It's like she instinctively knows what they need to hear." Marcus nodded, watching as Sarah demonstrated a modified push-up to one of the newer members, while explaining something that made both women smile and nod with understanding. "She's thinking about becoming a trainer herself," Jenny mentioned as she joined their conversation. She told me she wants to specialize in working with women who have experienced trauma. Apparently, she's already started taking courses. The information didn't surprise Marcus at all. Sarah had developed an intuitive understanding of how to build strength in people whose confidence had been systematically destroyed. She understood the psychology of fear, the importance of safety, and the power of small victories in ways that no textbook could teach. As the afternoon wound down, Sarah approached Marcus one final time. "I have something for you," she said, reaching into her gym bag. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to him. When Marcus unfolded it, he saw that it was a letter, written in Sarah's careful handwriting. "You don't have to read it now," she said. "But I wanted you to have it. It's everything I never got to say about how much this place and all of you meant to me during the darkest time of my life." Marcus looked at the letter, then at Sarah. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. That day you took off your jacket and showed us the truth. Why did you do it? You could have just quit and found another gym." Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "Because I realized that hiding was just another form of prison. Every day I covered up those marks, I was letting him win. Every excuse I made for my limitations, I was accepting his version of who I was supposed to be." She paused, looking out at the gym floor where people were working toward their own goals. Taking off that jacket was the first time I had ever refused to be ashamed of surviving. Marcus felt the profound truth of her words settle in his chest. "And now?" "Now I know that surviving was just the beginning," Sarah replied. "The real victory is building a life that's worth all the fighting it took to get free." As Sarah gathered her things to leave, Marcus realized that everything he thought he knew about strength, about training, about helping people reach their potential, had been transformed by watching one woman refuse to give up on herself. The metrics he had once used to measure success, weight lifted, miles run, body fat percentage, seemed trivial compared to the courage Sarah had shown every day just by showing up. That evening, alone in his office after the gym had closed, Marcus read Sarah's letter. In it, she thanked him not just for helping her get physically stronger, but for learning to see past his assumptions about what strength looked like. She wrote about the other women she had met at the shelter who were now coming to her new gym, about the support group she was facilitating, about the life she was building that was entirely her own creation. But the line that stayed with Marcus long after he finished reading was near the end. "You taught me that the strongest thing anyone can do is show up for themselves, even when no one else understands why it's hard. Thank you for finally seeing me." Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his desk drawer, next to the gym's mission statement that he had written years ago. Tomorrow, he would rewrite that statement. Because Sarah had taught him that a gym should be more than a place where people get physically fit. It should be a place where people discover what they're truly capable of, where limitations are questioned rather than accepted, and where everyone's version of strength is honored and supported. The next morning, Marcus arrived early and made a small change to the gym's layout. He moved some equipment to ensure clear sight lines to all exits, added better lighting to the corners, and posted a simple sign near the entrance that read, "This is a safe space for all bodies, all stories, and all versions of strength." It wasn't much, but it was a start. And as Marcus had learned from Sarah, sometimes the most important transformations begin with the smallest acts of courage.